I think AI is going to be an incredible tool. I think it definitely has a place. I think it still needs work. In regards to capital raising, you should never automate 100% of the capital raise. It's going to get to a point where people are only going to be doing business that they can actually meet and shake their hand with.
When you make the jump to either syndications or fund managing, you have to add an additional skill because you're no longer just buying real estate, which is a skill in and of itself. You got to learn how to, underwrite the market, do your due diligence. Now you got to learn how to attract capital and basically convince other people that what you're doing makes sense. Where did you go to learn all of that capital raising skill set?
Time and experience. Before anybody starts raising capital, they need to start at the foundations. If you don't know how to read a financial report, you have no business raising capital.
Talk to us a little bit about follow-up. People just don't tend to follow up very much. Talk about a little bit about the importance of following up with them and not just taking like, hey, they never responded, they must not be interested.
One of the most painful experiences I had in raising capital.
Dallon Schultz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is actually your studio. We're here at the Capital Flow podcast studio here in Arizona, and I came to do a podcast with you, and we said, screw it. Let's take advantage of the fact that we're both together, and let's do one. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
One of the things that's been fascinating for me is that you and I have very, very similar stories, just slightly different order, but the ingredients are the same. We both are connected with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the real estate guys. We've had some injuries. I've told my story a few times and things, but tell me about your story, especially when it came to the injury part, because that's kind of how this whole trajectory started, right? You were not a real estate guy to start with.
Correct. Yeah. So I actually grew up in a real estate home. My grandfather owned a few hundred units of multifamily at his busiest time, and my father was the landlord. He was the manager for it. So I grew up around the management side of it. Always had a job for summer, learned a lot of that hands-on type of work that goes into property management and maintenance. And so it was a great start, but this was in upstate New York. I was shingling roofs in the middle of an 85, 90 degree summer, like 80% humidity, shoveling sidewalks in the winter at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning before I went into school. So tenants wouldn't slip. And that was my view of real estate investing. I was like, this sucks. This is terrible, and I want nothing to do with this. And I've always had a desire to give and to serve. So I had an interest to get into the medical field. I don't like school, so I knew pretty quickly like the doctorate route wasn't for me. And then started connecting with other people that were registered nurses or RNs. And I was like, okay, I can see myself doing that. You're bedside, you're interacting with patients, you're making an impact, providing value. So that's the route I decided to go. And the intention was always to specialize. I wanted to become a nurse anesthetist, make a few $100,000 a year, and then get into real estate. Because I understood the value of the real estate. I just didn't want to do that dirty work I did growing up. And so that was the path. I got my bachelor's in nursing, started working in the emergency room right out of school. And a couple months into that, I broke my leg playing soccer. Now, one of the reasons I got into the medical field was for the safety and security. I was married, 2 kids at the time, and I wanted that stable income. I wanted that safety to be able to provide for my family. Most men, I'd say the majority of men, it's ingrained into us. We want to be able to provide. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't able to. As I was sitting in the ER that I worked at with my friends taking care of me, I realized in that moment I was out of work. And I never thought of that before. Right. I knew other people would get sick and hurt, but I failed to realize what would happen if I was the one that got sick or hurt. And that actually threw me into a depression. I'm on the move. I move a lot. With a broken leg, I was in a chair. I was in a recliner for weeks, couldn't move. And it was right around New Year's. I think this was 2017. It was right around New Year's. I was like, you know what? New Year resolutions. I wasn't doing anything with my life, so I started listening to podcasts. So I went to Apple Podcasts and I typed in real estate podcast. Mm-hmm. First podcast that came up, Real Estate Guys Radio, who you're associated with. And what I loved about them is I didn't know what I wanted to do in real estate. And what I loved about their shows, they were all things real estate. Right. And so I was soaking everything up as a sponge. And they kept talking about this purple book, this Robert Kiyosaki guy. Never heard of him in my life. But after you hear a name multiple times, you're like, okay, if somebody's saying that name, if they're mentioning this person multiple times, there must be a reason why. I'm not a reader. I picked up that book. I couldn't put it down.
Right.
I got through it within a few days. I was recliner bound anyways. And 2 weeks after reading that book, we bought our first Fourplex without our own money. And one thing I want to clarify here is that book it's not a tactical, this is how you do it. Something in my brain shifted. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I made a couple phone calls, and then we had our first deal purchased, not like under contract, like bought within 2 weeks.
Yeah. And that's really important because a lot of, and I've gotten to know Rob a little bit. He gets a lot of flack for that book because it's not tactical enough. People say, well, I didn't learn anything, or there's nothing really in there, but it truly is a mindset book. It helps you put things it's a contextual book or a mindset book. It's the way you view things versus here's how you go buy real estate. You go get in a contract and here's a sample contract. It's really more about mindset, right?
Yeah. And the tactical stuff doesn't matter if your mindset's not there. Now for you and I, we had to go through that mental transition. In the medical field, I showed up to work. Here are your patients. Here are their medications. Right. Here's a checklist. And you just go through the list. Yeah. I was trained to be a task puncher, right? Just knock it out. And so for me, I had to go through that. I had to have that mental shift and start considering other avenues of making income. So for me, as bad as that accident was, I no longer can be a leg model. So that's unfortunate because I got this weird hernia thing on my leg. But for me, that was the timing of it worked out exactly how it was supposed to.
When you look back at that time when you broke the leg, obviously at the time you were probably saying, why me? Like, this is awful. Like, I can't move around. But looking back now on that, would you say that was something positive in your life as opposed to negative?
100%. Yeah. And one thing, I've shared this a few times. One thing I don't share as often right along with it. So we had just had our second kid. And he's special needs. We know that now. We didn't know it at the time. So it was a very difficult time trying to figure out what was going on those first 6 months of his life. I had just started working. So I was working night shift at the hospital. My wife was working as a nurse as well. We just had the second one with special needs. And I was coaching high school soccer on top of it with all this stuff going on. I wasn't being sorry. I wasn't being the husband and the father that I needed to be. And I found this out later that day that I broke my leg, my wife literally prayed and asked God for a break. And so we laugh about it now. Yeah. We laugh about it now, but I was so consumed I was on this new real estate journey. I was starting a new job. I was coaching youth and soccer, which I absolutely loved. And it was all about me. I completely failed to see what was going on around me. And so we joke about it now, but I've got to give the credit to my wife. And as painful as that situation, it was my tibia. The tibia, other than your femur, is one of the biggest bones in your body. So the amount of pressure to fracture that it's an enormous amount. That was the most pain I've ever been in my life. And I broke both elbows too. I would rather take the elbows versus the leg. But for those that may be struggling with something right now, I mean, let's give them some words of encouragement, because I was in a similar situation where I had a 30% chance of death with my ordeal. Like, I was in surgery. It was like I was asking, why me? Like, I was in the 100%.
You were in the, like you said, depression was definitely in there. But now looking back on it, to me, it's like one of the best things that ever happened to me. And I think it sounds like from what you're saying, it's also, you look back and say, man, I'm so glad that happened, because had it not happened, where would you be today?
I probably wouldn't have been married, if I'm being honest. And I'd still probably be in the medical field. So, and in those moments, it's hard. It's hard to see the light. It's hard to see the benefit that comes from it, because it doesn't come right away. And in those moments now, moving forward, whenever something's not going the way as planned, or tragedy strikes, or something happens, it's not easy to do. But what I try to force myself to do now is like, okay, what am I to learn from this, or what good is coming from this? And I've had countless of conversations with people over the past few years, similar situations. They all suddenly get let go from a job that they've been with for 20, 30 years. They go through a divorce. Their business partners try to take over their company, and now they're in this 2 or 3 year lawsuit, and all this stuff happens. And on the other side of that is significant growth, significant opportunity. And so I've I've learned to just accept it and go with the flow. And rather than asking why me, ask what can I gain from this?
Yeah, and I just wondering if that's, that's definitely a mindset thing, right? Because you can either be having the victim mentality, or you can be like, hey, how do I make a positive of this? And it sounds like, I think the people we hang out with tend to respond in a certain way, right? Because they always say, look, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up. I don't know if this is normal, because it's happened to me, it's happened to you. I bet you if we talk to 50 people in our circle, we'll have that similarities. But I really would encourage folks to, when you're going through adversity, to just see the positive out. There's always a positive that comes out of every negative. Cool. So that got you into real estate. I think your first property was a fourplex. You just really started. That fourplex is a great place to start. Tell me how you got. I mean, now you're a fund manager. You're managing millions and millions of dollars. Like how did you go from a fourplex to managing hundreds of millions of dollars? And why did you go from a fourplex? Like, why didn't you just continue buying fourplexes? Are a great business model. Why don't you just keep doing fourplexes?
I learned something. I learned about funds and syndications. So we bought that first one. A couple months later, we bought a second fourplex. And then again, listening to the Real Estate Guys radio, some gentleman came on and talked about a conference he was having in Dallas, Texas, apartment investing conference. Never been to a conference in my life, but I knew at this point I wanted to be in apartments. And up to this point, I always assumed that these large commercial apartment buildings that you drive by were owned by one really rich person from LA or New York or Dubai or something like that. So I went to this conference just because I was interested. I was well on my path now to becoming a real estate investor. Showed up and they started talking about syndications and funds. And again, like reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, something in my brain just clicked. Now I know somebody that only invests in fourplex and they are crushing it. Yep. They are crushing it. So for me though, like I could see the path of progress, and I knew I could keep buying fourplexes. That would be the easy route. But once I learned about funds and syndications, I realized that is ultimately going to get me to where I want to be. And if I kept going down the fourplex route, it would become a distraction. So we stopped buying for about a year and a half, and I got into full-blown education, attending any seminars, conferences I could, networking. And then that ultimately led us to participating in a couple syndications. Then we launched our fund, which is a $10 million fund. And we're involved in about 250 to 300 million worth of real estate in different capacities. I don't own that outright, but we're involved with it in different capacities. And that's how we got to where we are.
And how do you learn that skill? Because when you make the jump to either syndications or fund managing, you have to add an additional skill, because you're no longer just buying real estate, which is a skill in and of itself. You got to learn how to, underwrite the market, do your due diligence, find the properties, value, all that stuff. Now you got to learn how to attract capital and basically convince other people that what you're doing makes sense and why don't you come join the party? Like, where did you go to learn all of that capital raising skill set?
Time and experience. And I will say, before anybody starts raising capital, they need to start at the foundations. If you don't know how to read a financial report or an analysis from a deal, you have no business raising capital. And so for those first couple of years, I was underwriting deals left and right. I was talking to brokers. We picked up some smaller multifamily deals. We started some ground up development. And so we were in the weeds with all of it. And I think that gave us a really solid foundation to, one, understand what we were doing. And we were posting about it. We weren't inviting people, but we were sharing with them what we had going on, and we were providing value and education. So part of it, not knowing it at the time, I was rebranding myself. I was building a brand. I was building awareness. I had people that I graduated high school with, I haven't talked to in years, reaching out to me. They're not liking, they're not commenting on any post, but then I get a DM from them saying, hey, Dallon, like, I want to learn more. What's going on? That's actually how Paul and I connected. Yeah. And Paul got involved with the real estate fund, and now we have Capitalist Pro, which is our baby. But so that was the first thing, like, start with the foundations, learn how to analyze deals. And because of that experience we had, we realized that it was starting to become kind of competitive. I mean, we're a small fish in a big pond, personally, like with our fund. And we're connecting with people like Zach Haptonstall with Rise 48. We're based in Phoenix. He's based in Phoenix. If Zach and I are going to the same broker to discuss a deal,
Right.
Who's a broker going to offer that deal to? Like, let's be honest.
Yep.
And so we realized that one of the myths is if you find a good deal, the money will come. That's bullshit. That doesn't happen. And two, by nature, I'm a very collaborative person. I don't, there's natural competition, but I like collaborating. I'd rather be like, hey, how do we work together to create a better outcome than if we were to do this separately? And we realized a couple of years ago that if we could get better at raising capital, we would never have to look for a deal again.
Right.
And so once we made that shift and we stopped trying to source deals, underwrite deals, and we just started focusing on the relationship side of the business, now my mind naturally pivoted into sales and marketing, which I'm not. I never went to school for it. But again, just like I did previously, got into books, got into podcasts. We talked about Alex Hormozy when we interviewed you on your podcast. And so it's still growing. It's still improving. But having that singular focus, I think, was key.
You mentioned one of the myths of, if you find a good deal, the money would come. Maybe talk about some of the tips or some of the things that if you're go back to when you just started. Let's say somebody's thinking about raising capital, they're starting that journey but haven't raised their first dollar yet. What are some of the advice, maybe the top 2 or 3 advice that you would give them in order to get to that first capital raise for their first deal?
Speaking from personal experience, it took me about 6 months to rebrand myself from Dallon the registered nurse to Dallon the real estate guy. And like 6 months minimum. And so,
by the way, that's what I hear a lot from social media experts too. Like it takes about 6 months for you to completely rebrand. If you want to go in a different direction, you got to, so many people start and they give up after a couple of weeks because it's not working. It takes a good 6 months.
Or, right. Or if I was still posting about my experiences at the hospital and then I was posting real estate, people are like, oh, okay, who is he? Who is he serving? What's he doing? And so I think getting clear on what you want to be and making sure that's what people see. Before somebody wants to close on that first deal, they should be raising capital 6 months previous to that. And one thing we noticed, and I'm not trying to talk bad about any coaching program or mentorship program because they provide a lot of value. That's how I got introduced to it. I know people that have done very, very well. They focus on finding the deal. This is how you find a deal. This is how you talk to brokers. This is how you underwrite it. And my theory on this is because it's easy to track. It's easy to get those students to get quick wins. They get so excited. Oh, I just underwrote this deal, or we just submitted an LOI. And I've seen this happen time and time again. They submit that LOI. They're working, they're grinding for a year. All of a sudden their LOI gets accepted. And they're like, oh shit, now what do I do?
Yep.
And then they realize now they get thrown into this frenzy of, I got to raise $5 million. I got to raise $10 million in the next 60 days. Because once you're under contract, it's just like a single family home.
Yep.
There's a deadline. And if you can't raise that money, you lose the deal. And oftentimes money that you put down for the deposit. So people get thrown into this frenzy and it triggers this fight or flight. And now they're coming into every conversation, capital raising conversation, with this commission breath. They're coming in desperate. And we joked about this on the podcast you and I did previously. We refer to those people as assholes. So now the only time that people in their network are hearing from them is when they're asking you for money. We've all probably had an experience with a friend or family member that's participated in multi-level marketing. I've been there, right? College student trying to put money on the table. There's such a bad rap when it comes to multi-level marketing, because oftentimes people get in and all they do is talk about their product.
Yep.
And the only time they're talking to you is when they're trying to get you to buy something. Yep. One thing that we work very, very hard that we had to realize, and that we now help our users on Capitalist Pro realize, is capital raising. Too many people treat it like a one night stand. You're happily married. Yeah. I'm happily married. Paul's happily married. We've got kids. I didn't ask my wife to marry me on that first date.
Right.
We were getting to know each other. Are we aligned? Do we have similar beliefs, values? We shared everything about our past, about what we want for the future. We connected, we dated. And then when we were ready to take that next step, I asked her to marry me. And then we had the engagement period even before the marriage. Capital raising is literally no different. And I think too many people, they get that deal under contract, then they rush into that bar trying to score that one night stand because desperation sets in. and it doesn't work. And so it needs to start minimum, in my opinion, 6 months before you even have a deal to raise money for.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that many syndicators would benefit from is if they understood the best time to raise money is when you don't have a deal.
Yes.
Because first of all, it's impossible to have commission breath if you don't have a deal. And you can really focus on what's really important, which is trying to understand from your prospective investor, what is it that they need? Because if you have like a development deal and you're talking to somebody who is retired and relies on cash flow, it's just not a good fit, right? So to me, raising capital is all about finding out how can I help you as my prospective investor? What do you need? What are you looking for? Asking them those questions. And then you can finish up the conversation like, oh, that's cool. Well, thank you. Hey, if I come across something like that, do you mind if I send an email to you like that? I mean, what are they going to say? No, don't send me an email. Like, yeah, of course, send it to me. So then when you do actually have a deal and you send it to them, if there's some context to that, it's not like I'm just raising money. So it's such an important point that too many people miss.
And what you mentioned there, this is something that we really push and promote. It's a wait list. Think of it as a soft commit. People may not be ready to tell you like, yeah, I'm going to invest $500,000 into your deal. Even if it's a soft commit, people that's very vulnerable when you start talking about finances. But what if you had a form? What if you had something that was just like, they check a box. Yes. Keep me in mind for the next deal. And one of my favorite examples about this wait list
methodology.
Yes. Thank you. Is Elon Musk. Now, I don't know what your views or feelings are on the Cybertruck. I think they're ugly as shit.
They're the most ridiculously ugly thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're on.
And I love Elon Musk. I love Teslas. I rented a Tesla when I'm here in town. I think it's an amazing product, but that truck has got to be the most unsightly.
It's a trash can.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Anyway.
So now that we've got that established, okay, I think the majority of people think that. So if Elon went to the bank and said, hey, loan us X amount of millions of dollars so we can create this and sell it, they'd be like, Elon, dude, like you've made beautiful cars. What the hell is this thing? But he didn't do that. He started a wait list. And people had to pay $100 deposit to join that wait list to get first access to the Cybertrucks. It was just a theory. It was a concept at this point. Like Elon's brilliant at doing this. And so now he had, I don't even know how many people not only sign a form saying I'm interested, paid $100.
Yeah.
So now he goes to the bank.
I don't think it was like 10 grand or something for you to put the deposit, I think, in order to get on the wait list. It was like real money you had to put down.
It was real money. And I don't remember the exact value, but either way, now he comes to the bank and says, hey, not only did they sign a form saying that they were interested in this trash can on wheels, but they already paid me. So now he has some starting funds. He has some seed money just from putting out some posts and emails and some marketing. And now the bank's like, oh, okay, that many people want it. Yes, we'll fund it. So that idea of a wait list, I think, is severely underused, and it's because people bypass it completely.
Yeah,
they jump right into, oh shit, I got a deal, I got to raise money, and you talk heavily on compliance. When you don't have a deal, it makes it a lot easier to just educate because you don't feel like you have to try to pitch everyone on the returns and all that. Which, by the way, we don't even talk about with potential investors till the second, third, or fourth call, and oftentimes it's third or fourth call. The first and second call is very much, all right, tell me what you're looking for, what experience you have in investing, and we're dating. Yeah. We don't talk about the deal. So those wait lists, I think, are critical because you can get those opt-ins way before a deal even comes. And that opt-in can be as simple as, yeah, keep me in the loop on that next deal. Yeah. And you do 6 months of intentional marketing and conversations. And then when you're talking to someone, it's like, hey, Mauricio, I don't have a deal right now.
Right.
Your defensive walls of sales they drop. Yeah. It's like, okay, now we can have a normal conversation. Yeah. At the end of that, you say, yeah, keep me in the loop for the next deal. I got to know you a little bit. I appreciate you. I trust you. I understand what you do. Keep me on the list. And then you start building that list. And now when that deal comes, not only are you marketing compliantly to people, especially if you're doing a Reg D 506B, because you have that substantive relationship, but these people are warm. They're warm. They know what you do. And this is how people are raising money within a week.
Yep. And I'm glad you brought up the pre-existing relationship, because I was going to go there, and that's absolutely one of the things that you need to be doing anyway. So this is a good time not only to do the compliance part, but to really get to know your prospect and find out what exactly they are, so that you can make sure the shoe fits, right? Whatever you have to offer fits what they're doing. I had a couple questions about sort of some tips on the email marketing, but I'll skip that for a little bit, because I want to talk about your CRM in that context. Talk to us a little bit about follow-up, because I know you're a big believer in follow-up, and I agree that the people just don't tend to follow up very much. So even with your prospective investor, you've talked to them, you kind of get an idea of what they're looking for. Now you do have a deal, you reach out to them. Talk about a little bit about the importance of following up with them, and not just taking like, hey, they never responded, they must not be interested, let me move on.
One of the most painful experiences I had in raising capital, this was a gentleman, owned a massive HVAC company here in Phoenix, just sold it to private equity. So he's sitting on money. And Paul actually goes to church with him. And so he shared with them like, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. And he's like, interesting. I've never invested in something like this, but I definitely want to hear more. We had multiple phone conversations, Zoom calls. We had a lot of great conversations. He's like, yep, I'm definitely interested. Keep me in the loop. And we went silent for about 3 months. Us, like not him. We went silent for about 3 months. A deal came in. I call him up. I say, hey, we got this deal. We got this opportunity. Are you ready to go? And he says, Dallon, I wish you called me 2 weeks ago. We just wired a few $100,000 into another investment opportunity because I forgot what you did. And for me, I'm like, how do you forget? We had multiple conversations. It wasn't that long ago. The reality is people are busy. People are busy. They like the idea of growing and preserving their wealth, but there's so much stuff trying to grab our attention. And that was on us. That was on us. And that was a few $100,000 mistake that we're feeling. And after that moment, we're like, this can't happen again. And so it's reaching out manually though is also very exhausting to me, because I've got a lot of stuff going on. Paul's got a lot of stuff going on. And so this is what got us into understanding more of the importance of follow-up. So what we have now, what we help with our users is automated nurturing. And so at minimum, if he was at least getting value-based emails, not asking, value-based emails in his inbox once a week, minimum, my belief is that we probably would have been top of mind that 2 weeks previous. Even if he wasn't reading them, even if he wasn't opening them,
right.
if he could see our name and associate it, he'd be like, oh yeah, I've been getting those emails from Dallon and Paul, and I got some money I need to invest now. So that's where the importance of follow-up and nurturing really came into play for us.
That's such an important point, because even if they're not reading your emails, the fact that they see your name pop up, even if they just immediately delete it, if they see your name and maybe the subject line, there was a company that, I don't know how I got on their email list, but it was a 1031 exchange company. And I remember reading a couple of emails, but after that, it was like, I don't know. And they didn't email that often. It was maybe once every couple of weeks, maybe even once a month. Never read the email. But when somebody asked me, hey, do you know any good 1031 intermediaries, blah, 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 I would be like, actually, I know this. And I would go find my emails, because they were just constantly in my inbox. And so that is such an important concept of, even if they don't read the email, the fact that they're popping in once a week or once a month or whatever. But let's talk about that, because I definitely, now that you've got your CRM and you're an expert here in the funnels and everything, you said that a minimum once a week email, a value add email. What's too much, right? Because I see some people emailing every single day because they want to treat it like a social media thing. Like, hey, you post on social media every day. Is emailing 3 times a day too much? Is once a day, twice a week? Like, it maybe depends on what stage you're on. Talk a little bit about the frequency of how often people should be emailing and what types of emails people should be sending.
Great question. And I'm going to share with you just personal experience. I don't have a marketing major. I never went to school. There might be a specific number there. But what we found and how we structure it is you've really got to meet people where they're at in the funnel, where they're at in that pipeline. So you consider an investor, if they just saw you speak at an event and they come into your pipeline, they most likely aren't ready to invest with you next week. There's this process that people need to go through. This you can look up online. It's just a general marketing funnel, right? Top of the funnel is awareness. then you have consideration, then you have decision, and then conversion or fulfillment. One of the biggest mistakes that we've done ourselves and that we see with other people, and we're changing this, is that it's just a blanket drip email. It's just you get people in there and it's just general information. Sometimes I don't even ask for it. You get their name from somewhere else, and now they're getting these emails from you. We refer to something more so as progressive nurturing, and that's meeting the investors where they're at. In order to meet them where they're at, you got to know where in the pipeline they're at. What do I mean by this? Let's say we did a workshop on self-directed IRAs. Self-directed IRAs are a phenomenal way to raise capital for syndications. We do a workshop, somebody opts in. Now there's 8 emails or so following up about self-directed IRAs. So that's an example of progressive nurturing, giving them what they opt in for. Now we do have a general, we call it our core email drip, which is general education. We do that at the top of the funnel. We speak to the pain points, or you can refer to them as the hot buttons of why somebody would want to work with you. And this doesn't just apply to real estate investing. This could be any business.
By the way, full compliance. I use your CRM, and I'm not in the business of raising capital. I'm in the business of coaching and mentoring and helping folks. And it works for any business, really.
Right, because whether you're raising money or trying to get coaching clients, it's still building that relationship. That's what a CRM, a customer relations management tool. Now we integrated a lot of automation and systems to make it easier for our users. So, but you're right. Like anybody, whether you're raising capital or not, if you're trying to grow your lead list, it's a great tool for it. And so that core email drip, we keep that at the top of the funnel. That's where we email people weekly, and we're speaking to the pain points, the things that will build awareness for them to want to go to that next stage, which is consideration. And so once they're in consideration, then we tone it back a little bit, or we change the messaging. And so I don't know what the secret sauce is. I don't know what the secret number is. I know I used to take personal offense when people unsubscribed from my email list, and my mindset has shifted on that. At the end of the day, they're cleaning up my list for me.
Right.
If somebody is unsubscribing, yes, you could look at it like, hey, you're delivering too much, or you're not delivering enough value. If people have a good idea of how you can serve them and they're unsubscribing, they're not your ideal client.
Right.
So move on. And so my personal mindset has shifted on that. So you want to be careful. And I think people want to avoid spam. Spam happens when you're delivering stuff to people that they didn't ask for.
Right.
So getting opt-in is critical, especially with Yahoo and Google. They are cracking down on email marketing. So the best thing you could do is to get somebody to opt into your list. Do not, personal recommendation, do not buy a cold list of someone that scraped it offline. We've had users do that, and it blacklisted their email.
Yeah. Because
they're bad emails that people didn't ask for anything. That's spam. When people are opting in, that's a completely different situation.
What about, this is a selfish question because I might as well get some free advice here from you. But I think, so take a capital raise. Let's say they have a list and they just haven't emailed, they've been collecting emails over the last several years. Yep. And they haven't really emailed them for a while. I'm in that boat myself where I literally have, I think, about 10,000 contacts of people who've opted in for something, but some of it's been over 15 years, right? How do you start re-engaging those people? Because they've kind of opted in, but it's been like, I don't know, a decade since you've talked to them, or maybe not, maybe for most it'll be a couple of years, but is there some best practice of how to slowly get them sort of integrated into, or is the goal to try and get them all unsubscribed so we can get a clean list? How would you recommend older lists because they may have come across your platforms like, this is amazing, let me start emailing them, but they haven't talked to their list in years.
Yeah.
What's the first step they need to do instead of just going straight into a sequence?
So I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something we've realized over the last year, bringing new users on. So users switch over to Capitalist Pro because they're either on maybe a more expensive solution, they're not getting the support they need, or they just want more systems and processes in place. And we realized that one of the key indicators that kept people using the system and appreciating it was sending emails right away. Now, when people are switching over to a new CRM, sometimes that can be a pretty heavy task. You said you got 10,000 emails, you got 10,000 names. And so one of the things we've integrated to our onboarding, this is for everyone, anyone that signs up with Capitalist Pro, part of the onboarding now is on that second call, that second one-on-one call with our team is working with them to send a retargeting email, because we've recognized there's a lot of people that have these names. Maybe they're in their phone, maybe they're in an old CRM, and they're like, I don't even know where they're at. I don't even know if they're interested. And so we've put together a retargeting email. Now, what this retargeting email is, it's you being you. Hey, Dallon, this is Mauricio. We've made some updates in our changes you may or may not have heard. I just sold my practice to my partner. This is what I'm primarily focusing on now. I just wanted to let you know, make sure you were kept in the loop. Is this something you're interested in being kept in the loop on? And so that's the first email. And then if they open it or don't open it, then we have different paths of what additional actions and follow-up happen. And I think that retargeting email is like 3 to 5 emails. Yeah. We have the ability to text. So we may or may not introduce that. You got to be careful with text, because that's a lot more personal and invasive.
And there's also rules around text.
And there's rules around text.
Start blasting people.
Right. There's compliance and stuff. And we walk all of our users through that when we set up their CRM. And so that's what we do. We do a retargeting, and it's just like, hey, Dallon, let's catch up. I know we haven't talked in a while. You've been on my list. You probably don't even have any interest in what I'm doing. Here's what I've got going on. If you are interested, just click here. Nothing will happen. I'm not going to spam you. This just lets me know, like, hey, you're raising your hand. Keep me in mind in future. So that's how we recommend it to our users. It's an invitation. Yeah. It's not like, hey, join my coaching program, like
100%
special deal, like sign up by the end of the day. That's not what this is. It's just, hey, here's some changes in my life. I wanted to make sure you were kept in the loop. If you're interested, great. If not, then we can remove you from the list. We want to be respectful to your inbox.
Let's land this plane. I got to ask you an AI question. So let's land this plane with an AI question. Number one is, first of all, I want to know, how do you see AI playing into the CRM world and the automations and all that stuff? What role do they play? But I also want you to talk about a theory I heard you talk about, where your theory is that because of this whole AI stuff that's happening, getting to the point now where you can't even tell if this is actually I mean, just look at social media these days. Like half of those people are bots or AI generated responses. But you think people are going to want to go back to sort of in-person events and sort of that personal connection. So I want you to talk about that, but also in the context of how is this AI, that's this revolution really what it is, how that's going to be affecting email marketing, CRMs, and relationships in general.
First of all, I think AI is just a buzzword right now. Everybody throws AI out about this and that. And I tried this AI professional headshot generator last year. I didn't know what to do with the stash. It was like distorting my face. It threw like 4 curls out, 2 on each side. So I think AI is going to be an incredible tool. I think it definitely has a place. I think it still needs work. Now, in regards to capital raising, and I tell this to all of our users, you should never, and I don't think you can ever automate 100% of the capital raise, especially if your minimum is $100,000. That's going to be done like shaking hands, meeting in person, or there's a very close referral that's like, hey, Dallon, I've worked with Mauricio, the mutual respect and trust there. You and I will still probably jump on a call, but needing to meet in person may not be necessary. So in regards to AI, we are going to be integrating that into our system this year. Going back to that marketing funnel, right? We talk about the awareness, consideration, decision, and fulfillment. Where I see AI really coming into play and significantly increasing how efficient people are is at the very top of that funnel around awareness. If it was me sharing information about what we do and how we serve our investors, or whether it was an AI generated video, if I'm speaking to your pain points, you're going to be listening. Now, at some point, as you move through that funnel and you go from like, okay, I understand how Dallon can serve us. Now I'm really going to start considering him. I want to get more tactical. I might schedule a discovery call with him. That's where I feel like you need to be coming into play. And even that discovery call, it's probably going to get to a point where you have your bot trained and it's a face that looks like you. But my belief is that all that can help move them through the front end of the funnel. But me personally, I already have trust issues with people. And so, maybe this thwarts my perspective on it. But I believe it's going to get to a point where people are only going to be doing business that they can actually meet and shake their hand with. Because it's getting to a point where you're not going to know who you're talking to. You're not going to know who you're wiring money to online if that's the only interaction you have.
Yeah.
I think it can help prime people. I think it can help build that relationship. I think it can help you accelerate the dating phase. But it's when they go to an event and they see you speak on stage and they're like, okay, what Dallon's actually saying and who he is actually matches with his AI bot and what he's saying and what I've been seeing. I think that's where the connection will happen and people will move forward to that next stage.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, the personal touch is never going to go away. And to your point, they're going to probably crave it more than ever. I do think that, and it's not here yet, but the speed the thing is working at, I do think we're going to get to a point. I'd love your thoughts on this and then we'll wrap it up. I do think that with AI, since it can process such mass amounts of data, that we're not too far away from a place where your email marketing could literally be personalized one-on-one, because I can get all the data about you, Dallon, specifically, and they can scrub your social media profile. They can scrub this. They've got all this data on you that the AI can then craft a specific message that covers your specific pain points, which is different from Paul's and Mauricio's. It's very individualized. We're not there yet, but I think that's coming, whether that's in 5 years or 10 years or 50 years, I don't know. But yeah, when we get to that point where you don't know if you're talking to a real person or not, getting together in person at an event, at a meetup, or just shaking somebody's hand for coffee is going to be, everything. So,
and what you just shared is already happening.
Yeah.
There's these tools where it will scrape people's social media profile and it will change the way it words a message.
Yeah.
And that's going to be some of the things that we're exploring this year. And also with like LinkedIn messaging as well. So it will be more targeted. It will be more strategic. But at the same time, the people on the receiving end of that, they're not dumb. They're going to know it's an AI bot doing it. And so I think there's going to be a lot of resistance to even if you're speaking to how they think, how they understand things, you're still going to have to get on a call.
Dallon, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or learn a little bit more about what you do or Capitalist Pro, what's the best place to send them?
We're going to start putting out actually a lot of stuff on YouTube. So we're gearing up for that. We're going to be putting out a lot of content there because it's a CRM. So understanding the automations, the process, the system, how to optimize it. Like, it's not just a tool, it's understanding the framework behind it and knowing how to utilize it. So we are going to start putting out more content there. I've referred to this marketing funnel multiple times. So we do have something special that we've put together for people because they don't know what stage should I focus on. Should I focus on the awareness? Should I focus on consideration? Like, where am I struggling with the most? So for those listening, if they text COMPASS, COMPASS, COMPASS to 623-624-1190, they'll get a link to a tool. We call it the Conversion Compass, that they'll answer a series of 10 questions, and it will pinpoint what stage in that funnel you should be focusing your efforts in, and then how Capitalist Pro can help you accelerate that. So super cool tool. We put that together because a lot of people, they don't know, and they might be excelling in one stage of the funnel and struggling in another. So that just provides some clarity for them.
They don't know what they don't know. We'll put all that details in the show notes. So, but anyway, thank you so much for hosting us here for this podcast. And thanks for all the great information today.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy.
If you'd like to join us live on these episodes and have a chance to get your specific question answered, you can simply go to realestatesyndicatorlive.com and register to be live on the show. Hope to see you then.